Okay, the second Florida journey continues with Steve Keck, and this is October 4th, 2021.
Okay, go ahead and start talking. We just have to go with this.
Okay, now just to go over a little bit, we left off last month. We had stopped around September the 7th. The second Florida is still in camp of instruction in Richmond. What I want to go over first, real quickly, is I came across in my research on the official records a letter that General Magruder, who is the commander of the Army of the Peninsula, had sent to the Secretary of the War. In the letter, he has his proposal for defending the peninsula, which I will go into detail on some slides here a little bit later on in his presentation. I just want to explain that he puts in there about how he wants to do it, put a defense across the peninsula from approximately Yorktown over to the James River. And it goes into quite some detail on how he proposes to do it. But the one thing that he requests is troops to man it. And based on that letter, which the letter was sent out, if I remember right, but don't quote me, I think it was around September the 10th. Well, the War Department sent out orders to 5 regiments at Richmond shortly thereafter. The one set of orders was for 4 regiments that were in camp of instruction in Richmond. They were on the set of orders, and they were dated September the 11th. And they were all to move to Yorktown, and the War Department would provide them with transportation. On the next slide that I'm going to be bringing up here, this is the copy of the official records of the orders that was given to Colonel Ward. You can see it's dated September the 14th. What I think is interesting about this is the 5th Regiment, and it was not a part of the other orders, which had all 4 regiments on there to go to Yorktown. So I don't know if the 2nd Florida came later in thought. One thing that could be discussed was that I did in my readings find out that General, I believe his name is Kirby Smith, Floridian, he was with an army in the West, and he repeatedly requested the 2nd Florida be assigned to him. It was just kind of strange that the War Department decided to send him to the peninsula instead. They would all go.
Hey, Steve, let me ask you something. You mentioned this was the 5th Florida, the 5th Regiment. Where did you get that from? Because I know
5 regiments.
Oh.
They were the 13th Georgia, the 16th Georgia, the something Louisiana, and Cobb's Legion. They're all on the same set of orders.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Glad you mentioned that so I could clarify that. But they would all these units would be going to Yorktown, and down at Yorktown at that time was General Rains, who was under Magruder, but he was basically in command of the troops around Yorktown, from what I gather.
Okay, next one.
I believe we're ready for the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we look at the orders and how it just says for them to get down there with as quick as they can, basically. I looked in the library on the secondfloridas.com article. You have that thesis in there, that master's thesis written by Shane Turner. And we also see that in the diaries and the memoirs of Captain Fleming, that they talk about that the unit left Richmond on the 17th and got to Yorktown the evening of the late afternoon of the same day. For those of us who have been to the peninsula, I just have to throw the question out there. Do you think that they could have marched 50 miles approximately in one day? Now, what I did, if anybody wants to comment on that, go right ahead. I'll give you a minute.
No, I don't think they could have, Steve.
Okay, I got another course of action here. In my research of the Richmond dispatches, I came across on the September the 5th, there was an ad in there, I guess you would call it, that had the Richmond and York Railroad schedule. Now, this was a company that owned the railroad, but also had a contract with the steamship line. And on this map that we have up here, you see where on the star clear to the left, that's the Richmond area. The railroad went from Richmond over to West Point, which is over there on the right at the top of the York River. Passengers left around 5 o'clock in the morning, according to the schedule, and they would get off the train at West Point and get on a steamer and travel down the York River to Yorktown. And that route, but looking at it, they could make it there in that day. Then there's also another return trip that the steamer would take back up the river. And then, so anybody that wanted to go to Richmond could get there, the following day. Now, this is the only thing that I could find anywhere that would be reasonable of that time period, because the only thing that they had to travel was either by boots on the ground or the limited rail service and steamship service. I don't know how else they would have got down there to get there in one day. But that's something that's, we can discuss, because none of us was there in that. But okay, we'll continue on to the next slide. This is actually a picture that was taken around the period of late 1861, early 1862 of the wharf at Yorktown. Okay.
Very cool.
This is a slide that I really like this slide. It's a modern day map of Yorktown. And you can see the comment there by Captain Fleming as to, where they were located at. What I want to point out about this particular photograph that's really interesting to Cindy and I is that if you look at the very black arrow at the right-hand side of it right there is where the Cornwallis's surrender monument is. And if you below it a little bit, you're going to see the arrow. There's a place called Hornsby's. I think it's a motel or something. It's actually a bed and breakfast. And there's a parking lot to the west of it. And as before Clay sent me this picture here, I told Cindy that I think that the second Florida was somewhere, to behind that Hornsby house and to the west in there. And that, when I had to really smile, appreciate Clay sending me this picture that he had there. Okay. Now, this is a letter. You can read it real quick. It's from the private right of the second Florida who was down there. And there's other letters that are in there, and you can find this on the website about the actual Cornwallis monument. Just to explain a little bit what you're seeing on this and describing it, that after the Revolutionary War was over with, the Virginia militia, they built a monument there of granite blocks that were, I think they were only like 7 feet tall with an arbor across the top. And I think it's unique in this writing here, what talks about that the people who picked at the rock, chipped away the large block of marble, and that it was slowly disappearing. Now, as we know, later on, McClellan will land on the peninsula, and the peninsula's fought over back and forth. So Confederate and Union forces passed through Yorktown. And one thing I found in an article there was that the comment was made at the end of the Civil War, the only thing that was left of that monument was the foundation. Souvenir hunters had picked it clean. So there's no picture of the current monument or the old monument. This picture we have here is the one that is there today. And you can judge the height of it by the two people standing in front of it. Now, Cindy and I, if you're standing at which would be like you're taking the picture of this, Cindy and I visited that monument when we was there, and you turn around, face the opposite direction, you can see the Hornsby house and the area back there which is today is pretty much open, of where the second Florida was. And that's one of the reasons why Cindy and I want to go there this coming spring about the actual time that Williamsburg took place, the battle and stuff like this, but we want to take a look at that, walk that ground again. Okay. Now we're back to, we mentioned General Magruder. At this point in time, the Second Florida is their bivouac there around Yorktown. So now we're down into the peninsula. The two main commanders that we're dealing with is Confederate General Magruder, there on the left, and Union General Butler. Now, just to give you an idea, from what I could find out also in the official records, Magruder at the time of this time frame, just 160 years ago, had approximately 6,000 soldiers under his command. Now, he calls those, he mentions them as effectives. General Butler had 11,000 men on the peninsula. Okay, next one. Now, this particular slide here, what I want to point out to it is we're going to get more into what is going on to set the stage for the next probably about 6 months until we get up to the actual Battle of Williamsburg and the Siege of Yorktown. What I want to point out is at the bottom of the screen, the star right down here at the bottom, that is where Fort Monroe is located, approximately. To the west of it, about halfway to the heel, would be the little town of Hampton, which is referred to by the Union as Camp Hampton. And right down on the very end of the heel of this peninsula would be what was called Camp Butler, which in reality is Newport News. General Butler had dug in breastworks on that blue line that I have drawn on there. And he put out an order that nobody was to proceed north of there, civilian or military, without his explicit permission. They didn't want anybody going up into the peninsula to talking to the Confederates or passing through the lines. Okay, now we'll move on to the next one. I think I got there. This particular, once the Second Florida is down there on the peninsula, Magruder has now got to take all these regiments and he's forming them into brigades. This Special Orders 89 that he published in October, it's hidden behind that up there, but I believe it was October today, I think, October, whatever day is, 5th?
5th.
5th, yeah.
Now, one thing that to me is kind of confusing if you read down through there, these are all brigades. There's no division or anything that Magruder's got in his army. It's divided up in.
Go ahead and read it to us, Steve.
Okay. The infantry forces on the peninsula are hereby organized into brigades as follows. The 1st Brigade, 10th Georgia, 2nd Louisiana, under Brigadier General McLaws. 2nd Brigade, 5th Louisiana, 1st Louisiana Battalion, Louisiana Zouavals, under Colonel Hunt. 3rd Brigade is the 14th and 15th Virginia Regiments, Colonel August. 4th Brigade, 6th and 16th Georgia, under Colonel Colquitt. 5th Brigade, 8th, 13th Alabama Regiments, Colonel Winston. 6th Brigade is the 1st, 5th North Carolina Regiments, Colonel McKinney. 7th Brigade is the 10th and 14th Louisiana Regiments under Colonel Solikowski. 8th Brigade is the 32nd Virginia and Montague's, Waddell's, and Tomlin's Virginia battalions under Colonel Ewell. Now, one thing I'll point out here, a lot of these are names you're going to be hearing throughout the war in history. Colonel Colquitt is the one who has fought down here at Olustee with us. Now you see the Second Florida is not mentioned in here. And I couldn't figure out or find out anything in here why not, other than maybe one thing that will show up in the next part of this order. This is just the first page that I put on the screen. So go ahead, Cindy, move on to the next one.
The following assignment of troops.
No, put it up on the screen, so. Okay,
Well, I was gonna read that one line.
Well, this here, it goes into more detail on his, Magruder does on his orders, because the general is going to place all these regiments in this line of defense that he proposed to the Secretary of the War across the peninsula. And I can read this on down there, because the following assignment of troops is hereby to wit, is the position known as Young's Mill and extending from Mr. John Patrick's on the left to the mouth of Deep Creek on the right as assigned. 1st McLaw's Brigade, 2nd 15th Regiment Virginia Volunteers, 3rd Fourneau's Battalion, 5th Regiment Louisiana Volunteers. Montague's Battalion, 4 companies, and 5th 2nd Florida Regiment to be held in reserve in rear of Young's grist mill. These troops and this position will be commanded by Brigadier General McLaws. Now I can go down, this actually order is not just 2 pages, it's 4 or 5 pages long. Magruder goes into detail exactly where he wants all these units placed, who's on the right and who's on the left of each one. So we see here that the Florida Regiment is in reserve, they're not on the line. You also find out down here, I didn't put the whole order up there, but down towards the bottom, stationed with the 2nd Florida is a cavalry unit that Magruder's keeping back there that's going to be doing patrolling in the winter and through the fall and stuff like that. But they're held back here in readiness with the 2nd Florida. So in this particular order, and you can go in the War of the Rebellion, and anybody want to email me, I can tell you exactly where to find this, so you don't have to go through all 11 volumes of the war.
I tell you, I love the detail that you went in here, and I question, like, I wonder what rationale they used to put 2nd Florida in reserve. You know, early in the war like this, before anybody had any credits to their units, I wonder how they made those decisions. You have any clue on that?
Well, it could be the strength of the unit. One of the problems they had was these units arrived there with maybe 2/3 of their men. The rest of them were still sick and not with the unit. Maybe the Florida had a bigger strength, so it was a better reserve. It could be that Magruder kept the reason why he's the 2nd Florida is not mentioned with McLaws at this time in this part of the order, is that Magruder's keeping him under keeping the unit in reserve under his direct authority. And so when one of the brigade commanders needs help, Magruder is the one who's going to make the decision on what to do with the 2nd Florida to plug the hole type of thing. These are some assumptions. You know, it's a fun part about I like about this is war gaming, as you would this kind of stuff. And we're going to find out. I don't want to give you a spoiler alert, but the 2nd Florida is not going to stay there the whole time, not through this fall and that. They are going to plug holes, but we'll get that needs to be further down the road.
All right, interesting. Okay, but right now, as far as we know, we're parked. We're camped around 300 yards from that monument right now.
Right now.
Yeah.
They, as you can see, this is now. Well, yeah, they will probably in the next day or two move out to these. The whole army is going to be taking up these positions. These officers have a lot of work cut out for them to move that entire army into these defensive positions and start developing the defensive positions. See, at this time, that's just a theory that Magruder has on a map.
Yeah.
It's got to be implemented now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But listen, before Ocklawaha, I want just before I need it, we united and talk. I would like to be able to tell all the guys exactly where we are while we're at Ocklawaha, so I can give a presentation to those guys if I don't have a chance. So I definitely need to know that.
Okay, that's what I was suggesting, Clay, that I had in mind of making up this dry erase board that will look just like the maps that we're showing you here.
Awesome.
And then I can update it every month, because we're going to, this map down the road is going to have Young's Mill on it, dam number 1, what's called Wyman's Mill, and the defenses up around Yorktown. Because the 2nd Florida moved around in these defenses, even before McClellan got there. So this map is that I want to have is going to be used and have corrections made on it monthly as everything takes place up until McClellan leaves the peninsula,
Huh,
way down the road.
that's so
I don't
cool.
have to keep doing graphics over again. I just keep updating the board.
Right.
And
That's cool.
that's what military people do in headquarters when they put up a big old map board with overlays on it to keep the generals briefed of how units are moving around and stuff like.
Okay, ready for the next one?
Okay,
Yeah, very good.
next map. Okay, now at this time, approximately on this map here, now this is what I'm going to copy onto the big board, is the Virginia Peninsula. And if you take a look at what we got right here is, you see I got a little red line there right below Yorktown. This is approximately, but not accurately yet, because I haven't put anything in there, where Magruder wants to put that line across the peninsula. And if you look down the south, I also got on here where Butler's breastworks are. If you look halfway between them there, where they're actually county lines right in the center, that's basically where, what was it, Big Bethel Church was, that battle.
Oh,
So see, that's no
okay.
man's land.
Yeah.
And that will be that way between now, October the 5th, 1861. And it'll stay that way until McClellan lands. And I don't want to get in about McClellan stuff like this, but you can see that with these three different camps that they got down there to the south, the Union does, McClellan just does not. A lot of people in the history book say, well, he landed at Fort Monroe. Well, I thought, okay, I've seen it. I haven't been down to Fort Monroe. It's a fort. How in the world are you going to put 120,000 people in the fort? So, but he had the whole bottom of the peninsula there. Camp Newport News was occupied by the Union. And like I said, Hampton. So he had property there to put those troops ashore. But if you look right below Hampton right there, we have what I'll be mentioning in the future is Hampton Roads. And we know what's going to happen down there in the spring.
Right.
Now, as a part of this, that one question that comes up, and I'm just doing this now because I'm as filler, Clay, if you don't mind. But if you take a look at this map and the Richmond area up here, one of the things that was always puzzling to me is when you look at what was going on in the war at this particular time, with the Union forces down there on the end of the peninsula, they had the blockade, but in 1861 it wasn't effective. There's reports coming in all the time that I read in the official records that blockade runners are just getting right by there, going up the James River and the York River. The Union didn't have the naval forces to go up the York River to interrupt the steamship flow on the York or the James. They had some gunboats, but usually they had one or two cannon on it, and they did not venture up those rivers very much. I did find out that, and some of this is in the Richmond Dispatch and papers that I read, that I always wondered how they got the firewood and stuff like this. I mentioned that, well, maybe the camp of instruction regiments were detailed to go cut wood outside of town, stuff like this. Well, Richmond had contracts with people downriver. So if we take a look see all the south side of the James River, that's Confederate territory, all the way down, including Norfolk. Steamships would come up the James River loaded with firewood to supply Richmond and other logistical support. So there's commerce going on the York River and the James River at this time, and the Union couldn't stop it. The only place that was a hindrance on the James River, someplace called the Rip Raps, and I just, since it's not really that significant, I didn't look it up. But it's just interesting that life goes on the peninsula, and Magruder's got communication where, in addition to these soldiers going to be placed down the road, he's contracting for the local plantations to have the slaves come down to dig the emplacements and the redoubts and stuff like that. And how much he was allowed by, he proposed a contract with the plantation owners, and the War Department came back and told him, no, you're giving them too much money. They're corrupt. You don't pay them that much. They dictated how much Magruder would pay the plantations for their slaves. So there's a lot going on, even before the big Peninsula campaign with McClellan. Okay, That's, anybody got any discussion? That's all I have on this one here for so far in our journey. That takes us up to October 5th, 1861.